175. That's how many days between the announcement of the arrival and departure of Patrick Kisnorbo from the Melbourne Victory Football Club. In that time, he was heavily criticised by Melbourne Victory supporters for being a former Melbourne City captain and championship manager. He was also heavily criticised by Melbourne City supporters for being a former Melbourne City captain and championship manager that would choose to go to Melbourne Victory. He led them to an Australia Cup final, left one of their best players out of the matchday squad after a reported bust-up in training, and lost said final at home to Macarthur without Valère Germain. He then got off to a wonderful start in the league, winning 5 of his 7 outings, including a convincing Melbourne Derby, leaving most people's expectations of victory right at the top of the table. Then, just as the Christmas Derby rolls around, he decided he wanted to take up a new opportunity overseas, reportedly as an assistant in Japan. Are City fans laughing? They're probably laughing. Victory fans, well, many for better or worse, saying good riddance and looking to put this whole chapter behind them. We're going to break down PK's potential motivations and the options to replace him. Then Melbourne City's young star Zane Schreiber will join us to look towards the Melbourne Derby on Saturday night. There's a preview for the rest of Round 9 and Football Australia's record-breaking transfer report on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil, and joining me tonight on Thursday evening, Jacob Stevens. Hello to you. It has certainly been an interesting week.
Yeah, we always say never a dull week in Australian football, and this has all sort of come quite early in the week as well, which makes a bit of a difference. It's normally on the Thursday, just as we're about to record, something will pop up, but at least we've had some time to prepare for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw there were lots of people on Twitter, you know, with memes and GIFs and stuff, all the A-League podcasts seeing this news come through after just releasing their weekly episodes. We got on the YouTube pretty quickly, Christian, to chat about it, but we've heard some more news since then, so it'll be good to talk about that.
Yeah, well, even when we jumped on that YouTube video, it still took us a bit of time to process it, get some information together, even though there wasn't many, because it came as such a shock, right? It was like, what has just happened? So, the past 24 hours or so, we've received new light on, the details behind it, even though we won't know sort of the full ins and outs. We'll try and dissect it as best as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we said, Tuesday afternoon, massive news, Patrick Kisnorbo departing Melbourne Victory with immediate effect. As we said, if you want our immediate reactions to that, you can go and check it out on the YouTube channel. But we do know a little bit more now. It's been revealed by a few sources that PK will likely be joining Yokohama F. Marinos. Of course, that is a team that we are very familiar with in Australia, but critically not as a head coach, rather as an assistant. Jacob, you weren't with us on Tuesday. Let's just get your first reaction to this news, and then obviously the development that he's not even leaving for a head coach, reportedly, but as an assistant.
I think it's hilarious. Like this is just such an A-League thing to happen. This coach comes in and he talks about, he wants to prove all the doubters, wrong, because everybody's hating him because, as you mentioned in the intro there, Lockie, Victory fans hate him because he's a City legend. City fans hate him because he's a City legend that's gone to Victory. Like, everybody was against his appointment. He's like, I want to prove that I can do this job and people will love me. And the Victory fans started to come around and were starting to back him. And now he just left again. It's so funny. It's also funny. You look at the coaches, some of the coaches so far this season have outlasted PK. Okay, yes, he left on his own accord, but, it's just, given the performances of some of the sides this season, I think that's just absolutely hilarious. And then to top it all off, the cherry on top is the fact that, reportedly it's just for an assistant role anyway. It must have been a case of he was looking for something this whole time, right? I mean, with the way that it's happened so quickly and developed so quickly, obviously the head coach position at Yokohama has been obviously switched around. Is it Steve Holland, I think, is reported to have taken that role, the former England assistant manager. But yeah, I mean, it's surely this isn't something that he's just decided on a whim. It's got to have been, he's viewed this whole Victory thing as a stopgap anyway, and that, hang on, this opportunity has arisen a little bit earlier perhaps than I expected, but I'm not going to turn it down. It does seem like sort of a backward step going to an assistant role, especially for somebody who so consistently wants to prove himself at that head coach level. But maybe also it's a bit of reluctance or caution on his side of things, obviously, with the way things went in France. He made that move over there the City group backed him, and it just didn't. Didn't work out at all. He was absolutely woeful there, and then obviously came back. So, perhaps there is still that playing in his head a little bit of him going, well, at least if we're terrible, I'm not the one that's going to get all the blame. There's somebody else in front of me, and hopefully if we do play well, I'll get some recognition for that as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange decision to move across to an assistant role, especially when you've got one of arguably the best coaching gigs in Australia with the Victory, right?
And given how well they started as well.
Yeah, I know. It's such a good start to the season. Everybody's predicting that they're going to go on and have a very good season at this point. Well, at least they were until this news broke. And now it's sort of up in the air as to what's going to happen there. But it does seem like a strange move.
So we'll get to Victory. I guess most of the big question, Christian, that people are asking is, why did Kisnorbo leave? Right? It seems odd. If you admitting that going to an assistant in Japan is a backward step, well, then you think, what are the motivations, right? Roderick Miranda, the captain of the club, and some of the senior management spoke to media on Thursday. They were all in complete shock. They found out on Sunday. What are the reasons? There is a CFG influence here. Yokohama are part of the City football group. Is that kind of something that was playing on his mind, that he wanted to be back part of that system? Obviously, Melbourne Victory, he signed a 3-year deal, right? The Victory people definitely thought they were going to be on a long journey together. Obviously, it hasn't worked out that way. Are the club potentially planning to sell some players in the January transfer window? Some of the quotes coming out today were a little bit vague in that respect. Does he not believe that maybe he'd have the squad towards the end of the season to actually push for silverware that would enhance his CV, whereas going to somewhere like Japan would do that better?
When you're a big club like Victory, right? I mean, we saw this scenario play with Ange Postecoglou, albeit not early. I think it was a year and a bit before he made the jump to the Australian national team. But obviously, the board wouldn't have been thinking they would have lost Kisnorbo this early on. I mean, after a few games, and then all of a sudden he's out the door. It just goes to show, surely there had to be something lingering behind the scenes of some sort, whether that be transfer issues, money issues, I don't know, a potential fallout. I just don't know, because yes, he's going to Japan. We know it's a top league in Asia, of course. They perform always very well in the Champions League. Yokohama obviously have been a top club in the past few years since Ange made his arrival. And maybe from PK's point of view, he's thinking, okay, yes, it's an assistant manager position, but at the same time, there's always this turnover, right? Especially like clubs like Yokohama, where a couple of seasons a coach always leaves, for an opportunity in Europe somewhere, as has happened for Postecoglou and Kevin Muscat in the past. So maybe he's thinking, if that vacancy opens up maybe in the next year or two, then perhaps I can push into that slot, given his reputation, standing with the CFG group. So yeah, you just don't know what to make of it, really. We still need to learn a bit more, I think, because you said, Lockie, the players are even in shock. No one at all expected this to happen, right? So I just think there's still more to come from this. I'm sure, I don't know when we'll learn it, perhaps maybe in a few months, down the track, who knows? But yeah, I guess we'll touch on Victory later, but from a Victory perspective, it just throws a spanner in the works to say, obviously they've got to sort out the manager issue now. Do they go for an interim for the rest of the season? Who do they bring in? The options are pretty limited. So yeah, it is a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that it feels like there is a lot that we don't know. Victory management came out and denied, number one, finances, but also any discontent among the playing group or relationships that have caused this decision. That should be noted as well. But yeah, who knows, really? Let's talk about some of those names that could replace him. Some of them that we mentioned on Tuesday that I reckon it's worth putting a line through. John Hutchinson, wasn't aware at the time. He's apparently lined up a job in J2 with Jubilo Iwata. Ross Aloisi as well have been noted by a couple of people. Back in the day, Ross Aloisi was arguably more of a villain to Melbourne Victory back in his Adelaide United days than PK ever was. That red card in the grand final is the obvious example. So maybe he would be, an appointment along the same vein as PK that wouldn't be responded to so well by fans. And then Graham Arnold, I was thinking about this a little more after Plee brought it up. He was asked on the back page right after he got out of the Socceroos job, about, potentially going back into head coaching. And he seemed to imply that Australia was kind of done for him and he would be looking for somewhere overseas. So in terms of the names we brought up in that video, it leaves us with Harry Kewell, and I don't think any of us think that is a very good idea. Obviously, you've got Arthur Dials, who is stepping in as the interim at the moment. There's every chance that he could just get the job outright. Mark Milligan, I think, for me, is the leader of the race. I know Jacob Calviert came out and had some words about that today. He hope he stays, but obviously football is football. And then a couple other of Pauletti's wildcard picks as well. Some names that we didn't mention, Besart Berisha, to be honest, I didn't think that needed mentioning. That's on the same line as Harry Kewell to me as well. It's like, if you're going to get a former player, then I think Mark Milligan just is kind of leaps and bounds ahead of him. Des Buckingham is a really interesting one. He became the youngest manager in A-League history during a 14-game stint with the Wellington Phoenix, I think around 2017-18, was an assistant under Ernie Merrick. Then he's bounced around between the New Zealand youth system. He was an assistant at Melbourne City. He went to Mumbai City for 2 years and won their regular season and the ISL. And then his boyhood club, Jacob, I'm sure you're familiar, Oxford United, got them promoted to the championship for the first time in, I think, about 25 years. And has just been let go. They're sitting right on the boundary of relegation this season. And then the final curveball, which has been talked about, is Mark Jackson. And I wonder how Mariners fans feel about this. UK journalist Pete O'Rourke suggesting that he is being considered for the role. This is the guy, according to Teo Pellizzeri, that broke the story of Jim Magilton to Melbourne Victory in 2012. So he's got a track record. Jacob, I've just thrown a lot of names at you, but what are your thoughts on some of those?
Mark Milligan, I thought was almost a lock to be their coach coming into this season in the first place. There was a lot of rumours swirling around in the back end of last year that he wouldn't be sticking around with Adelaide United and that he'd have a role elsewhere in the A-League. And, obviously then a lot of eyes on the Victory job at that point. And I thought that was basically a lock. Obviously, he's a Melbourne Victory product through and through and a legend of that club. And, while under his assistantship at Adelaide, I suppose, the defence hasn't been fantastic. I think this year it's looked much better, especially now that he's got perhaps the calibre of players that sort of helps out with that, with Bart Vriends coming in, and Dylan Perez has been very good as well. So, what we've also seen with him is something that players have spoken about consistently is Nestor Irankunda, for instance, when it was announced he was making that move over to Bayern Munich, the first person he praised was Mark Milligan. It wasn't Carl, it was Mark. So, that I think was quite an indication that the players are really fond of him and like the work that he does. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him become one of the sort of the top candidates for this job for the Victory, because he's got this experience now at a club that is sort of moulding the way that A-League clubs are looking to become, with the sort of not reliance on youth, but putting a lot of investment into it and backing them, but still getting results. He's obviously, like I said just before, he's a legend of the Victory. Like, it just seems like it would be a good fit. And you can imagine the style of play that he'd want to sort of enact as well. We've seen a little bit at Adelaide where it's very gritty, but it's exciting and it's fun and it's attacking. And obviously that's something that Victory fans have always sort of associated with their team. So again, that looks like a perfect fit. Some of those other names that are floating around though, Harry Kewell would be a very poor decision, I think, on the balance of probabilities. Mark Jackson is an interesting one. Would he take the job? All things considered, quite possibly. It would be a good opportunity for him to come back and stamp his authority as this coach who he's sort of faltering at the Mariners a little bit, I suppose, in a way, but perhaps out of his control in the way that he sounds in press conferences at times. Like, he's starting to put the blame a little bit on the playing group and things like that, with, especially picking out some of, you think their top performers, the likes of Mikael Docker, and saying, well, his work rate and his effort isn't good enough for what we want to do, and that's why we're not seeing results. It does seem like perhaps he's sort of hit a bit of a wall there at the Mariners, and this could be an opportunity for him to take a step forward, because it is with a bigger club, but prove his credentials there with the pressure that comes with managing a bigger club. So, that could be an interesting option. One that I saw thrown around that I thought was quite funny was Marco Rudan, whether or not he wants to get back into coaching. Obviously left the Wanderers on pretty bad terms, and there's a lot of question marks about what was actually involved in his departure from the club. But I think people are just putting two and two together there, because Rudan sort of played up that villain role, the pantomime villain, a bit with the Wanderers, and that's something that the Victory, I suppose, have been throughout their history in the A-League. But no, I mean, of all those names you mentioned, I definitely think Mark Milligan is the best fit, and Mark Jackson, if available, would be a tremendous pickup for them as well.
So, Christian, I think on Mark Jackson, I think the interesting question is not whether he would join the Victory, because I think, if he was like a free agent or something, I think the question is easily yes. I think the question is more, would he leave the Central Coast Mariners right now? Because I don't think there's many other ways to look at it if he were to leave, other than the idea that he's leaving a sinking ship, right? He's sold all his players, the system is kind of faltering behind him, and all of a sudden he's leaving that to go to a better team with better players and better facilities and more money. That's how I would see it.
Depends how selfish he is. I mean, you can understand it to a certain extent. I mean, you're jumping ship to a team who's got better resources, better chance of going deep in the competition for silverware. But in the same token, I'm sure he has so much respect already for the Mariners, what he achieved with that group, winning the treble last season. Is he thinking to himself, like, is it the right thing to do to leave them in this state? Maybe he thinks it's his responsibility to get them back up, and perhaps it's a portion of him that he's putting the blame on himself to say, okay, I've sort of been part of the reason why this team finds itself in this situation. I know it's not all solely his fault. They've lost players, this, and that. But it could be his motivation as well to try and bring them back to the top. It's going to be difficult, that's for sure. But that, who knows, that might be the character within him. That could be a decision that's pondering. But yeah, I mean, for any coach, it'd be so tempting to move to Victory, because of it can propel your career to the next level, right? If you're winning trophies with a big club, then of course you're going to attract interest from overseas, and that can take your managerial prospects and career to the next level. So there's so much to weigh up for him. But in the end, knowing Mark Jackson, just the way he speaks and how much respect he has for the club, I don't see him leaving. Not for this season, at least.
Yeah, I think it's worth re-emphasising as well that the only rumour was that Melbourne Victory were considering Mark Jackson, not that Mark Jackson was considering Melbourne Victory. So we have no idea what he thinks about this. I do want to just ask one more question, though, because a lot of people in the conversation on this on social media, when certain names are coming up, it's like, well, Melbourne Victory have no money. They're not going to, splash the cash on a big coach or something like that. And whilst obviously we've talked about their financial situation, and they have tried to cut costs around the park, and part of Tony Popovich, the reason he left was not specifically because of the money, but his new contract was definitely delayed because they were trying to negotiate down the salary, right? However, just because Melbourne Victory are losing so much money, they are allowed to lose money as much as the owners are willing to expend, right? So having no money and not having a willingness to spend are different things. So I think they proved that, in my opinion, by signing Nicolas Vergos. They have Bruno Fornaroli. They'd already signed Jing Reese, I believe, by that point. If you're going to go and spend out $600K because he's a marquee player on someone like him when you've already got people in positions, then you're obviously willing to spend the money. So if the right name came along, I don't think, as long as it's not too exorbitant, I don't think the money would be a big issue.
Are there any coaches that would cost them enough money for it to be considered a bit of a risk anyway?
Yeah.
like it's basically the case of most A-League coaches. They're not going to be on so much money that it becomes a big financial risk, even for a club that is losing money. And you mentioned Vergos. They brought him in. So they're clearly willing to pay money. I think if the right person comes along, then they wouldn't mind it. But I don't think that any of the names that we've discussed either would be after massive bucks anyway, right? Like Mark Jackson's coming from one of the poorest A-League clubs. Yeah. He might expect a little bit more than he's already on, but his expectations as to what the A-League can afford is probably pretty well set. Same thing with Mark Milligan, and then some of these outside coaches, the Des Buckingham, for instance, you mentioned, Oxford United again, not exactly a rich club. It does seem like the names that we've been discussing wouldn't be asking for much money anyway. So I don't think that it's a big worry about, are Victory going to be able to find the right person because they can't spend much when, all of the options that they have that would be good fits for them probably wouldn't be costing them too much anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to say, as we wrap up this topic, the latest For Vuck's Sake podcast, they did an emergency one after the news came out for Patrick Kisnorbo. If you haven't listened to it, regardless of what team you support, I promise you, it's worth your time. Absolute guarantee. But as we turn our eyes to round 9, the highlight is obviously the Melbourne Derby, the Christmas Derby, and hoping to play a big part in that game is City's young central midfielder, Zane Schreiber. I spoke with him earlier. Well, we're joined now by Melbourne City's Zane Schreiber. Zane, thank you very much for joining me today, mate.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
It's been a pretty whirlwind start to the season for you. You've thrown on half-time in the Melbourne Derby, and then you've got a couple professional starts under your belt now as well. What's that been like?
Yeah, no, it's been very good for me personally. Worked really hard to get in the position where I am today, and all the boys at training have helped me a lot. So, yeah, 45 minutes against Victory was surreal playing in a derby, Victorian derby. I'm from Sydney, so it's been never experienced one of those before. So it was very good playing one of those, and even though we didn't get a result that day, it was still unbelievable to play in front of that atmosphere, and the crowd was just unbelievable. It was amazing, but no, and then following the next couple of weeks, starting those 3 games against, I believe it was Western, Perth, and the Wanderers was a dream come true, to be honest. Like, you work your whole life to start games and play professionally, but you got to pinch yourself sometimes that you're in that you're there. Obviously, like, it's just unbelievable. But no, I think I played pretty well those games and helped the team out, which was my main priority. But yeah, no, it's a dream come true.
Is it a bit nerve-wracking half-time of that derby? I think you were, 3-0 down at that time, and Aurelio's going, Zane, we're bringing you on, mate. You're the one we're looking for.
To be honest, I thought I would be leading into the game coming on at half-time, for example. I thought I would be nervous. But to be honest, I was just thinking about helping the team out and trying to have a good half and trying to show what I can do. So I wasn't too nervous, actually. I was more excited to play in front of the crowd, and I was more excited to try and help the team out, try and get some sort of result and try and just get better from the first half, because that first half wasn't good enough from us, and we know we can play a lot better. So my main objective was just to help the team, and I wasn't too nervous. I was more excited.
A little more recently as well, you had that pretty chaotic finish against Auckland on Sunday as well. You come on, what was it, like 67th minute, and then straight away you have the goal disallowed. They have theirs disallowed. You got the 2 goalie errors as well. A bit chaotic. It must not have felt like a normal game of football.
No, it wasn't. Getting chucked on 1-1 against top of the table was I was actually more nervous for that, to be honest, because it was a tight game. I thought we played really well in the first half. Second half was a bit slow, but they got a set piece goal, which was unfortunate, but I believe we were still in the game at that time. And then getting a gift of a goal like that was a bit relieving, to be honest. I haven't seen that for a while, but no, it was like, went in, I was like, do we celebrate? Who do we celebrate with? Who do we run to? But no, it was it was chaotic. It's hard to come on one of those games where the intensity is so high, and you gotta just straight away get chucked in there. You got to just be there straight away, competitive. When you come on at halftime, you can build yourself towards the tempo of the game. But as soon as you come on in that 60th minute, 67th, whatever it was, the intensity is so high. You got to try and get there as soon as possible. So it's very tiring. You got to work hard. But no, that game was a very good game for a spectator, I believe. But no, it was disappointing not to get the result. But you got to try and look at the positives, I guess. Like, Auckland haven't lost a game all year, and we were the first team to take points off them, the first team to score 2 goals in them. So, no, it was disappointing not to get the 3 points, but we can take what we get, and we've got to try and look forward to this weekend. But yeah, no, very, very chaotic game and different game, to be honest.
From a team perspective, right? Like, you had 4 wins going into this game, but at that point in the season, it was all against the 4 bottom teams at the table. Does it feel like, particularly that first half where you definitely had the better of them, did that kind of prove to you guys as a team that, okay, you do have what it takes to take it to some of the better teams in the competition?
Yeah, for sure. I think we all believe in our ability to be up there this season. I think we're aiming for top 2, top 1 this year. So, yeah, we've won 4 games, but a bit against the bottom teams. But I feel like on any given day, anyone can beat anyone in the A-League. So, yeah, we take those wins, but we've got to try and focus on now beating those top contenders this year, like your Victories, like your Auckland, for example, and Sydney's and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's very, very important to get those results. And, yeah, we've just got to try and look forward to this weekend against Victory, where we've got to definitely win. We've got to try and win, obviously, but try and definitely improve on last performance against Victory, and to not only prove to the league but to ourselves that we're up there this season for sure.
It's been quite a tumultuous week for Victory, obviously losing PK. I don't believe there was any overlap between him and you at City, right?
No overlap.
So, if you don't know him personally, then, but what do you think that changes from a perspective of looking forward to Saturday night? Because obviously they played a very similar style the entire season, but potentially someone new in charge might shake that up a little bit.
Yeah, possibly, but nothing changes for us, to be honest. We only control what we control. Like we're just focused on what we can do this week in our preparation, and we got to prepare of how they've been playing all year. There might be changes, but we don't know that. We can't possibly know what they're going to do if they change anything with their new coach. But we just got to try and figure out what they've been doing this season well and what they haven't been doing well, and exploit those things. And yeah, nothing changes on our end. We just got to work hard this week and try and get the result this week.
I noticed Aurelio says that a lot in presses as well, actually. It's always control the controllables. Is that a very familiar message to you?
Yeah, a lot. That's a lot. We focus on that a lot, actually. Like in our sessions, we only can control what we control. Like we can't see we can see what they're doing, but we can't know everything. Like on game day, they might change. There might be an injury. There might be a change of thought from the coach. So we can only try and perform at our best, and we can't let anything affect how we prepare, because that's the only thing we can do, prepare to our best of our ability. So yeah.
You mentioned you come from Sydney as well. What was the driving factor between coming down to Melbourne?
Oh, look, I love Sydney. I always supported Sydney FC when I was young, and it was a tough decision emotionally to leave Sydney FC. But in the long run, I just feel like Melbourne City is they were there for so many years. They were premiers, I believe, 3 years in a row, and won championship. So I just wanted to play with the best and train with the best, because I know that will make me a better player. And yeah, they really convinced me to come down here, and I've always admired the way they play, and I believe that suits my style of play. So yeah, that contributed a lot to my decision.
So you've been asked to play that kind of pivot role, I guess, on the ball, the one in the base of midfield, and kind of be that, I guess, quarterback guy that's passing the ball out, using your passing range. That's obviously, suits the City system, I'm assuming, as you're saying, that suits the way you want to play as well.
Yeah, of course. I love to dictate the play. I love to be behind the ball and receive the ball and try and switch the ball, or just control the tempo or decide. I love to decide and dictate the team's play, whether that's we go forward and we try and score a goal, whether that's calming down because we need to control the game a bit more. Like that's just my game kind of thing. So yeah, that definitely contributed for me coming down, watching like Aiden O'Neill, for example, and players like that who did it at the top level. Now they're in Europe, obviously. So just watching them all the time. Even when I was against Sydney, I admired the football a lot, and playing with those guys from that team was just unbelievable. But yeah, that's my game, and I try and play that game to the best of my ability, and just try and help the team each week get 3 points.
You got those first starts when Jimmy was out with suspension, or he's obviously back now, and it's been going between the two of you. Whether you start or not, I'm not sure if you know. I won't ask you to answer that specific question, but assuming you get a taste of it out there on Saturday, just to play in front of that atmosphere again. The Christmas Derby is usually the big one as well, hopefully getting close to a sellout. How cool would that be?
Oh, it'd be amazing just to get on the pitch, whether I'm starting or not. It doesn't matter to me as long as we get the 3 points, and as long as hopefully a good game for the fans as well. Like we want to entertain as well, but main priority is to do better than last game and not have a slow start like a couple months ago. So yeah, it would be amazing to get on the field and do my part for the team, and we'll see what happens whether I'm starting or not. As long as the team gets the 3 points, I'm happy with that.
Brilliant. Zane, thank you very much for your time, and good luck on the weekend.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Take care,
Christian, that's shaping up to be a big game on Saturday night, isn't it? And it's been a while since we've had both teams kind of like in the top 4 and being really competitive at the same time. So it's really building up nicely.
Yeah, past few seasons has been a bit lopsided either way. A couple of seasons back, you had City beating Victory 7-0 when Victory went through that really massive rebuilding process, had Grant Brebner interim manager, and there was just a lot of turmoil there. And now the opposite, not the opposite, I guess. I mean, City were still relatively competitive last year, with the big names like Jamie McLaren. But this season, there has been a bit of a turnover, and I guess it's been Victory's turn to punish City. But with this Kisnorbo news coming out, you've got to ponder: will that impact the dressing room at all? Will that have implications on the field once they step out? Because I think for you, Lockie, you said during the YouTube video that you don't expect, for the players to really be derailed at all. I think it'll play a bit of a role. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, we don't know the interim manager and what he wants to bring to the table, right? If he's got a different philosophy or a different style of play, I know it's a bit risky to change a bit. You might as well just go with the same flow, just bring in what Kisnorbo's done and just sort of play it out like that. And I think that's to your point, Lockie, why you don't think there'll be much change within sort of the mindset of the players and how they'll approach the game. But you just never know. I mean, there might be a couple of tweaks here and there. Maybe he wants to stamp his authority. So it's just a bit of a wait and see. And for City and Vidmar, they'll probably be looking at this as an opportunity to say, okay, this team's a bit vulnerable. Let's just try and get at them in the first 15 to 20 minutes, see what they're like, see if they're rattled at all, if it's impacted them, and then go from there. So I expect City to come out of the blocks early, that's for sure. I may be proven wrong, but yeah, that's how I see the game being played out.
Very nice. All right. Well, we were recording a little bit earlier on Thursday than usual, so we don't have the complete A-Leagues ins and outs. I've pieced together what I have, what I can from different teams and their releases, so we'll give you some of the highlights, but this is not a complete list. On Friday night, Adelaide, they're bringing back Ben Falami from suspension. Sydney FC have a bit going on. Patrick Kisnorbo is out with a slight groin complaint. But his partner has just had their second baby. So, no tinfoil hats or anything, but hopefully he can rest up and enjoy that process as well. Of course, that's now a big question. Who goes to striker? Patrick Wood, Jaden Kaczynski, those kind of guys. So it'd be interesting to see. Leo Senna is back. And also an interesting bit of news, I thought, just quickly, Jacob. Aaron Gerd has signed a 1-year contract extension. Of course, theoretically, they're about to lose Alexander Popovich back to Korea because it's only a loan deal. That, we kind of talked about maybe the idea of bringing him on full time, but an extension for Aaron Gerd definitely says we're preparing for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, they're covering themselves there, aren't they?
Yeah.
I still think they'll go out in January and nab somebody because you do want that quality there. But it's good that they're able to keep it internal in a way, right? And just be able to extend one of their players and have faith that the squad that they do have is good enough in, if they need them anyway, rather than being forced to have to go and look for somebody. It is, that's a nice little thing to have in your back pocket for Sydney. And obviously Popovich has looked pretty solid this season in the back line for Sydney. They've been open in transition and all that, but we talk about that part of that is because of the way that they play, so that's going to happen. But I think that generally him and Hayden Matthews in defence have actually done a pretty decent job. So it will be a big loss. Whether or not they can sort of have some discussions about getting him back permanently or extending the loan or whatever, we'll see. And like I said, that'll come around in January, but to be able to prepare in advance for not being able to get him back, that's huge. And it means that they can potentially look elsewhere if they think that there's deficiencies elsewhere in their squad, which it's pretty hard to pick any holes in their squad at this point, outside of injuries. So Sydney finding themselves in a very, very good spot.
Yeah, honestly, even if they do manage to keep Popovich, there's still an argument to say they want to bring in another central defender.
Yeah,
we talked about Thomas Deng, his availability. I think that'd be
he'd
silly.
Be so good in that system as well.
They'd be silly not to ask that question, I think, which is interesting. I like this as well. They managed to sneak this line into their review. Their preview of the game. Sydney FC's home game double against Melbourne Victory. So this is the week after, I believe, is set to feature 2 live interactive performances with global phenomenon Bluey and her sister Bingo. Wow, some great halftime entertainment.
There you go.
Also, I haven't watched a lot of Bluey, but isn't Bluey a boy dog?
No.
No?
That's like, I think that was like the plot to an episode, maybe.
They're both girl dogs. There you go.
Yeah, where it was like that somebody like assumed that Bluey was a boy, and then she was like, "No, I'm a girl dog" or something.
Oh,
like
fair
that.
enough. I'm sorry,
again,
Bluey.
I've not watched it either, but I'm
Looks
sure
like you're a
I've
massive
seen
fan,
something.
Jacob.
Yeah. I know the memes, and that's about it. So,
all right. Well, to be fair, we have a few meme entries in this ins and outs team list. We'll get to a few of them here. Auckland SC out Cam Harrison with a calf injury, but in Beach. And no, that's not the goalkeeper that earned them 2 points on the weekend. That is a physical beach, reportedly New Zealand's largest ever inland beach. They've imported like 100 tons of sand, Christian. They're just building a little nice beach area on the side where the slide is. So Auckland fans can, I guess, hang out by the beach and build some sandcastles while they're watching their football.
Maybe I don't know, create their own beach soccer team. I don't know,
Yeah.
make a five-a-side, do something like that.
I like it.
No,
I like it.
I like it. Yeah, I've got nothing else to add really, just a bit of randomness to add to the A-League week.
Absolutely.
I mean, people always talk about how good it is to watch the game from a hill, right? At places like Leichhardt or Cogra, you know. Imagine being able to watch it from a beach.
Absolutely, it sounds so good.
Living the life.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. Brisbane will welcome back Keegan Jelicic from a shoulder complaint. Raphael Streak is away on international duty for Indonesia at the ASEAN Championships. Their tournament, he'll either be back late December or January, depending on how deep they go. Also, interestingly, Nisa Acosta was listed in the outs, but not mentioned at all in the press release, which I thought was a little odd, but he won't take part this weekend. Perth, we're not sure of their team, but we do know one confirmed out is Louis Kanga.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's been released by mutual consent. I find that alarming. I think we all agree that maybe he's not up to standard, and I know there was a lot of conversation about that this week, but the fact that they're not even waiting until January to when they could potentially bring someone in as a replacement, they've decided they had to cut ties now because it was getting to that point. So quite extreme measures, but he is gone. He's out the door. Melbourne Victory don't have their team, but obviously out Patrick Kisnorbo and a big in as well. And fans will be happy about this. Evangeline Victoria, the violinist, will be there before the game again. Funnily enough, I think that is a trade that most Melbourne Victory supporters could get behind quite intensely. Melbourne City, none of their big absentees will be back yet. New Year's Eve is the target for Matt Leckie. And then the other big news is that Stefan Kolakowski for the Wellington Phoenix, unfortunately, out for the season with a ruptured ACL sustained at training on Sunday. So very, very bad luck for him. And from all reports, I think I saw Piney talking about it today, has really taken to life in New Zealand. So best of luck to him in his recovery. Guys, let's get into the weekend look. Christian, you're going to kick us off with a burning question.
I've gone with the obvious one. So will PK's absence disrupt Victory at all? I've sort of just touched on it before. We sort of have a bit differing opinions. Lockie, I'd love to hear Jacob's thoughts, whether it would or not. But for me, I don't know. It'd just be a real statement, I think, for Victory if they were to win this derby, because I guess somewhat it would put this background noise behind them in terms of rumours of any rifts in the changing room or problems behind the scenes. I know one game wouldn't solve all those problems, but I think it would just sort of, I guess, calm the storm to a certain extent and give the players a lot of confidence and belief heading into the rest of the season to say, okay, we still are true contenders for the championship. But Jacob, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think inherently losing your head coach is a big disruption because it's what you've gotten used to. That's the person who's instilling their philosophy and their ideas on the squad. Obviously, to have an interim step in who's been in the system is going to help out, and it's going to make things a little less painful for the Victory. And perhaps, they sort of experience a bit of that new manager bounce that's always talked about, right? The old classic of when your team gets beaten by somebody with a new coach. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's not because they're good. It's just because the new.
Hey, they didn't win last week.
They did win last week. But yeah, I mean, it's. I think inherently it's going to be disruptive. I don't think there's any two ways about that. But I think what it's going to do is, I think you're right, Christian. It will be a big test of mentality to prove that the squad is able to rebound from this and work through this without any issue, right? Because things will be different for the playing group, but it's about their ability to still gather themselves together and put a performance out there. That's the most important thing. I think if they can do that as well, it's almost sort of a middle finger perhaps to PK of going, we didn't need you anyway. So, I think that they'll have a lot to play for. And obviously with it being a derby, that just adds to it. So it will be disruptive, but whether it will damage their form or not, I think that's all down to the playing group and how they can sort of get themselves together mentally to be able to keep up their form.
You want to kick on with yours?
Sure. Speaking of keeping up form, Adelaide obviously sitting in second, undefeated. They're coming up against arguably their biggest test so far. And it feels like we've said that every week as their opposition has gotten progressively more difficult, minus the sort of step back when they face Perth. They've come off the back of their first real comprehensive victory of the season against the Mariners, 4-0 away. Really good. Nobody put a foot wrong. But they're coming up against this Sydney side who just absolutely packed. I mean, obviously, Patrick Kisnorbo is going to be out, so that's a big loss for the Sky Blues. But Leo Senna back in is going to really help them control the midfield battle, which is something that teams have struggled to do against Adelaide this season. So I think if Sydney can do that, then Adelaide could be in a lot of strife here. Obviously, Falami is back in the squad. Viet's got a tough decision to make there. Does he go back to Falami, who was starting before he was suspended, or does he stick with Ayubi, who got the start last time out of necessity, but managed to bag himself an assist? Lots of questions floating around about that. So, it's going to be a real big test for Adelaide. It's going to be at home, Friday night football at Hindmarsh. I mean, it's an absolute staple of Australian football at this point. Expecting a big crowd. It's going to be warm, but not unbearably hot. But it's going to be their first real big test of the season. And, if they can keep up their form here, then who knows, maybe the sky's the limit for this side, because that would be a real statement win.
Yeah, weekend before Christmas as well. So hopefully some good crowds. Obviously the derby will help as well. My burning question, are MacArthur Mondays going to bring the goods again? We saw some pretty good, exciting, entertaining games last year. Also some really good crowds. For some reason, that Monday night over in Southwest Sydney just seemed to hit home with the fans. So two teams that are on that kind of fringe of finals obviously have a bit of quality about them. It'll be really interesting to see how this one plays out. Not two teams that you'd probably throw in, the outright excitement category if you had to rank them. But hopefully the combination on a Monday night gives us a fun game of football. Christian, a worst case scenario?
I've gone for Auckland to lose at home against Western United. So, I mean, the heart says Western United because I'd love to see them cause an upset. But I think if Auckland lose this game, coming off the back of the draw, first points to the season dropped last week against City, I mean, I just want to see this momentum keep pushing and hopefully you don't want to see the fans sort of tail off a bit. You just want to see this new franchise just keep going, and we know they've been such a success story so far. Obviously just a new startup, first season in the league. It's just been an unbelievable story so far, and I just hope they can just keep the momentum, because who knows, a few games with a few draws and a couple of losses, I mean, it might test the mentality of this playing group, and Steve Corica. That's when the real managerial skills and man management will have to come out. So yeah, for their sake and for the fans, I'd love to see them keep on this good run.
Speaking of the fans, mine's from the same game, and mine is that nobody turns up because they've dropped their first points of the season. The perfect run is over, and all the fans are super fair weather. And they're like, well, what's the point in watching? What's the point in going? Even with the beach, nope, we're still not convinced. And just it's like a crowd of like 3,000 or something. And we finally sort of pull back that veil and realize, oh, actually, nobody cared about the team in the first place. That would be an absolute worst case scenario.
I just had a thought. Could you imagine if they put the beach, or they got the port into the beach and they score a goal, just water going everywhere, splashing up and down, doing belly flops? That would be good value, actually. Let's get some of those port guys in there. My worst case scenario, to bring it back to reality a little bit, the Christmas Derby, if that doesn't sell out. Now, as of Wednesday afternoon, there's a little less than 7,000 tickets, so they are on their way. But for me, this is the one. It's the pre-Christmas. Everyone wants to turn up. You put your Santa hats on. It's a Melbourne Victory home game, so you got memberships taking out a fair chunk of those tickets as well. They got to get this one full. If they can't get this full, especially considering both teams have had a pretty good start to the season, I don't think there is much else that the clubs can do to get people in the door. So really, really hope that there's a sold out tag on Amy Park on Saturday night. Finally, Christian, ping from distance.
I've been pretty good with these segments with the ping from distances. With a couple of upsets, I'm just annoyed at myself that I haven't put it to my actual prediction. So I'm not going to go for a result this time. I'm just going to go for something silly. So Perth to be scrutinised for time wasting in the dying stages with scores level against Brisbane. I'd just love to see Zakovic get a taste of his own medicine. Obviously, this is going to be second bottom, playing each other. Not much to play for in terms, we obviously know there's no relegation. Like, it's not the end of the world, whoever loses this game. But just for that pride factor for Perth, I think they really do. Julius needs a result from this game. This is probably one of their very few opportunities that they can do it, albeit away from home at Suncorp. I think if that scenario plays out, it'll be pretty funny.
Jacob?
Mine is a result, unlike Christian's. And I think I actually mentioned this in our predictions video. Go and watch that, by the way. Is that part of me just feels like the Wanderers are going to beat the Phoenix this week. I can't quite place why, but it does feel like that they could just snatch a win here. That the Phoenix, obviously, sort of not quite firing on all cylinders yet. This one would just put a stake through the heart of the Knicks, and it could be perhaps a difficult one to come back from. Obviously, the Wanderers themselves really struggling at the moment as well. So, it just feels like one of those games that everybody's looking over because you've got things like the Derby, you've got Adelaide against Sydney, Auckland, Western United is going to be a good game as well. People, I think, are perhaps overlooking that this could be a bit of an upset here, and I think that the Wanderers could potentially get the job done.
I'm kind of regretting my ping from distance now because it feels like we're trying a little bit too hard. But I've also kind of nicked something from the predictions video. Western to take points off of Auckland, and I just wanted to mention again because I think it could happen. It's something that really, really could happen. Western are obviously coming in with plenty of confidence, having beaten Sydney. Auckland have had to deal with a number of team changes. They were lucky, obviously, to get the draw against City. Unlucky to go behind in the circumstances, but you know what I mean. So they've had to deal with a little bit of adversity. Western United feel like they're looking all right at the moment. I just think as much as an undefeated team against someone like Western can look on paper, I think an upset is definitely possible. Don't go anywhere. That is the finish of our A-League round preview, but we have a couple other things to talk about today, of course. First up is that Football Australia have released their inaugural football transfer reports. Now, this is happening for the first time this year because essentially the data is just more readily available, and we'll talk about that shortly. The numbers that I'm about to talk about are from the June to September 2023 window and the January-February 2024 window. So the most recent off-season is not considered in these numbers. However, men's professional transfer fees in this time increased from what was 6.3 million for the 22-23 period to 17.5 million in the 23-24 period. And that is just despite the number of transfers going from 19 to 20. That is transfers that included a transfer fee. 7 of those players came from the Central Coast Mariners. So that just gives you another indication of the situation there. But basically, the transfer value per player of these transfers increased almost threefold, which is quite astounding, really. Length of contracts has also increased. 35% of contracts signed during this period were between 3 to 5 years in length. That is up from 15% from the previous period, so more than doubled. So some really interesting numbers there. This is all largely a result of DTS, or Domestic Transfer System reforms, stemming from a white paper released by Football Australia in 2021. Since then, we've introduced domestic match calendars, so that aligns the transfer windows with the whole country, removing the prohibition of transfer fees outside of the A-League, a domestic transfer matching system, which is essentially just data capturing that allows Football Australia to monitor and analyze transfer data to inform policy, and a few other minor changes as well. But of course, there is still more to be done, and this report also confirms that the APL, PFA, and Football Australia, in its role as a regulator, are still going to holistically review the efficacy of the salary cap, explore the idea of transfer fees between A-League clubs, and identify other opportunities to strengthen both financial sustainability and competitive balance as part of the phase out of the Caceres clause. Other priorities, according to Football Australia, include integrating the national second tier, strengthening youth pathways, and fostering a financially sustainable football economy. Christian, I don't think there's nothing revolutionary here. I think it's just clear evidence of what we've already known for a little while, is that the transfer situation in Australia is improving. It's largely thanks to some of these reforms, but also just the appeal of Australian footballers on the global stage, but also an indication that there is still so much more potential ahead, and specifically the DTS allowing A-League clubs to pay transfer fees for players will be a big part of elevating those international fees, as well as like kind of a trickle down method.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all being ticked off there. It's great how I guess we're learning these processes, put with the APL, gathering all this information and being transparent, right? Because we touched on the survey that opened up a few weeks ago, and at least they're trying to improve their processes and
That was
make
the
it better in
APL,
terms
to
of
be fair. Sorry, just to jump in on that
the
PFA
APL.
report.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was the complaints about the APL, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, nonetheless, I mean, it's just great that at least we're getting this information right. It's not being hidden from the fans. Like it's really open. Like we understand what's going on behind the scenes, which I think is great from a fan and neutral perspective. The transfer fees we've known about for ages, right? I think clubs realize that the only way forward and to progress their football clubs, given the financial implications, really this season with those distribution cuts, is by investing in youth and moving young players overseas and gaining those transfer profits. And we've seen great numbers already, and we've only just really started in the past year or so. So it just goes to show, in the next season or two, how much potential, like you mentioned, Lockie, that we've got to come. And it's just if the APL can get their act together, on the financial side of things, and spending and investing money in the right areas, then I think the game moving forward is will be in a much better state than perhaps we will give it credit for.
There is another survey that was released over the last couple of days that I think does introduce some new numbers that people will find quite surprising. It's an independent research survey from Roy Morgan that suggests over 4 million Australians now support an A-League club, and that number is up over 50% since 2020. Before I get into some of the deeper numbers, would anyone care to venture some guesses in terms of the most well-supported clubs?
I know one of the big surprise results there is, I believe, is it Brisbane are sitting second?
Correct, yes.
Which I saw that and I was like, what did they get did they put the wrong team next to the number, or like what's going on there? Because we've seen the crowds that they're drawing.
Yep.
It's not fantastic.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go to the game. So I mean, we know there are a lot of Brisbane fans. Perhaps over the seasons past, we know Brisbane's situation. I mean, they don't compete at the top right and we know Australian fans, their perception, if they're not winning, they're not going to go to the games. But if you're going to give them a survey and say which is the well supported club, it's no real surprise that Brisbane is sitting up top. Maybe second's a bit too high, I would have said, but in and around that top four, I think it suits.
Yeah, so one asterisk, Wellington Phoenix, only Australian supporters were considered. But in terms of the list, then it goes Sydney FC, Brisbane Roar, Melbourne Victory, Perth Glory, Adelaide United, Melbourne City, and I think what would surprise a lot of people is the Western Sydney Wanderers in seventh. I think that's a bit further down. But in terms of some league-wide and just general football trends as well, the survey suggested that over 1.6 million Australians watch the A-League on TV, and then a much larger 6.1 million have watched any football on TV. Roy Morgan Industry Communications Director Julian McCrann says that although the A-League has increased its support base rapidly in recent years, there remains a large untapped market of millions of Australians who consume the sport being played overseas rather than the local product available around Australia. Bringing these two markets together remains the leading challenge for those leading the sport in this country. And it just goes to show, Jacob, that those kind of top funnel numbers are there. Obviously, plenty of Australians are interested in football. Apparently, around 4 million of them even call themselves A-League fans. But then we can't get even half of that number to watch on TV, let alone increasingly smaller numbers actually turning up to games.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit of preaching to the choir. I think everybody knows that the case is that football is an incredibly well-supported sport, not just in Australia, but it's the biggest sport in the world, right? Like every country basically has a professional football league of some sort. And it's, Australia being such a multicultural nation as well, massive influences from Europe, from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from all over. You're getting this massive grouping of people whose big sport is football, and it's not a surprise to see these massive numbers of people that watch the sport. But yeah, it is about trying to convert them to the A-League, and how do you do that? And I think that actually it's a little bit interesting to hear that comment from McCran, because he's saying, they've increased their supporter base in recent years, but they need to bring the two markets together. And I think that's showing that that's actually what they are doing, right? If they're increasing the numbers of people trying, that are, it's bit by bit. It's not going to be an overnight, suddenly everybody's an A-League fan. The fact that they are increasing, I think, is a good sign. Could they do more? Probably. But it's way above my pay grade, and I don't know the first step to even try and approach this issue. But it's at least showing signs that it's continuing to grow. I think people are perhaps a bit disillusioned by the idea of things like the NBL, right, which has had a recent massive explosion, is getting crowds regularly at 10,000 people. We'd think that's a great crowd at the A-League level, and they're doing that regularly for the basketball. But I think that people's expectations perhaps are sort of influenced a bit by seeing that and going, well, why can't football just be the same? Why can't it just explode and become the big thing? It was because football's already had that here. It had that sort of from when just about before the Wanderers joined until about 2016. The game was huge here, and it has been on a downturn since then.
I mean, even 2005, the A-League into the World Cup, right? John Aloisi, that was the moment.
Yeah, so I think that football's already experienced that boom that other sports are now starting to experience in Australia. It's just a cyclical thing. It goes around and it comes around. And, I think that what it's about now is this steady growth that we are seeing to make sure that there is a sustainable core fan group here that is watching the game and is watching the local game as well. So the fact that we're seeing increases there is a good thing. And I think that we shouldn't be expecting to see just a massive increase in the number of people going to games or watching on TV or anything, because it's just not a viable way of doing things, not just in football, but in sports in Australia, really. It only happens, once every, couple of decades for each sport that you get a big boom. So, football's had that a couple of times already since the A-League's inception. So I think that perhaps we're being a little bit sort of choosy by sort of requesting the same happen again.
It's hard, right? Because the people talking about the sport, because these numbers have fallen the way they have, the people who are still active and talking about it are the ones that are so passionate about it, and they just want other people to feel the same, and we can completely empathize with that point of view as well. And Christian, I guess what this is showing as well is that there is some steady growth, and Jacob's right. Steady growth over a long period of time really is the answer, right? There's nothing that's going to suddenly increase your crowds 10% overnight. You just have to be little by little, step by step, show up every day, promote the game, which is what we try to do every week. And just little by little, we'll get there.
It's going to be a game of patience, really, because we saw during that Del Piero Shinji Ono era, right? That's when the A-League was arguably at its peak, and I think we took it for granted a bit to say, okay, the A-League's just going to push forward here, that no ifs, no buts, we're in such a great position, and then we sort of shot ourselves in the foot a bit. So I guess a lot of things have to align. That's why I keep harping on about the FA and the APL having to be on the same page all the time, being transparent, being open, making the right decisions, because all of these little 1%ers add up to growing our league and growing the game. And just looking at social media and looking at how many podcasts now are covering Australian football, there's just a lot of content nowadays, especially even in the past 6 to 12 months. It's really booming. So from that lens, it's another example of how much interest there is in the game here. It's just about how do we promote that to other people who maybe aren't as aware of the league. We know the problems with the marketing aspect of it, of the competition. So it's just little things like that, and I'm sure we'll be on the right trajectory sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Go subscribe to the YouTube as well. Get us on the boom. We want to be a part of it. We want to hit 500 by New Year's Eve. That's your challenge. Or New Year's Day, maybe. There we go. We'll see if we can sneak that one in. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As always, Jacob, Stevens, been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Bit weird doing our recordings a little bit earlier than usual. It was still some good light outside coming through the window. It's starting to get dark in this room, so you might have noticed that change. But yeah, it was good to get it done early, get it done. I'm sure it gives you plenty of time to edit now as well, Lockie, which is
I have a tea time down on the peninsula tomorrow morning, so I want to do the drive tonight. So the earlier recording time is appreciated, Christian Montegan.
It's going to help because of the couple of unfortunate internet problems I had once again. So you have a bit more time to sort that out. So
yeah, you have crammed like your whole last month of issues kind of into one episode, but at least I can just go bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, we'll do. Hopefully it's not too much of drama, but yeah.
Nah, it's always good fun. All right, thank you all again for listening at home. We appreciate your company. Unlike some of your other regular podcasting, efforts, we will be not taking a break at all through the holiday period. Tuesday, Friday, every single week, we will be here. We hope you are too. We appreciate your company through the holiday period. On that note, we will see you next Tuesday for a review of round 9 of the A-League. We'll see you then. Goodbye.